Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the How to Better English podcast. I am Liam, and I am so happy to be here with you today to talk about one of my favorite topics in the world.
And I am Emma. It is wonderful to be back in the studio with you, Liam. I have been looking forward to this topic all week because reading really changed the way I look at language learning.
Before we dive into the wonderful world of books, we have a tiny favor to ask our lovely community. If you enjoy our show, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this episode a like. It really helps us reach more learners just like you.
And even more importantly, we want to hear from you. Please tell us in the comments right now how this episode is going to help you in your English journey. What specific problem with reading or vocabulary will this solve for you today? We read every single comment, and we are very pleased to see how you are growing.
We really do love those comments. They give us so much energy. Now, let's get into it. Today's topic is read books to better your English. Emma, when people think about learning English, they often think about grammar books or apps, but reading for pleasure is a total game changer, isn't it?
Absolutely, Liam. When you read a book, you are not just looking at isolated sentences. You are seeing how language lives and breathes. You are seeing how language cleft to create emotions, settings, and complex ideas. It is the difference between looking at a picture of a forest and actually walking through the trees.
That is a beautiful way to put it. I think many learners feel intimidated by books. They look at a 300-page novel and think there is no way I can understand this. But the benefits of trying are huge. Today, we are going to discuss how to select the right books, how to actually enjoy them without getting a headache, and we will cover some great vocabulary like plot twist, narrative, and how to immerse yourself.
Let's start with that first step, selection. Liam, if a learner goes to a bookstore or looks online, how should they choose a book that helps them rather than frustrates them?
The biggest mistake I see is people choosing books that are too difficult. If you have to look up every second word, you are not reading. You are just using a dictionary with a lot of extra steps. I always recommend the 5-finger rule. Have you heard of that one, Emma?
I have, but why don't you explain it for our listeners? It is a classic for a reason.
Right, so you open the book to a random page in the middle. Start reading. Every time you see a word you do not know, put up 1 finger. If you reach 5 fingers before you finish the page, the book is probably too hard for your current level. If you have only 1 or 2 fingers up, it is perfect. It means you understand the context, but still have room to learn something new.
That is such practical advice. I also think interest is key. Do not read a classic book like Great Expectations just because people say it is good literature. If you hate 19th century dramas, you will quit by page 10. If you love science fiction, find a sci-fi book. If you love biographies, read about someone you admire. The interest keeps you turning the pages when the language gets a bit tough.
Exactly. Motivation is the fuel for learning. Now, let's talk about a word we mentioned earlier, narrative. In the context of books, the narrative is the story or the account of events, but it is also the way the story is told.
Right, and understanding the narrative structure helps you predict what might happen next. English narratives often follow certain patterns. Once you get used to those patterns in English, your reading speed increases because your brain is anticipating the flow of the language.
And speaking of the flow of the story, we have to talk about the plot twist. A plot twist is an unexpected development in a book or a movie. It is that moment where you go, "Wait, I did not see that coming."
I love a good plot twist. For an English learner, a plot twist is actually a great test of comprehension. If you feel shocked by a twist, it means you were following the story well enough to have an expectation that was then broken. If you get to the end and you are confused about why things changed, it might mean you missed some key details in the narrative earlier on.
That is a great point. It is like a built-in comprehension check. Now, Emma, another thing we wanted to discuss is how to immerse yourself. To immerse yourself means to become completely involved in an activity. When you are immersed in a book, you forget you are reading in a foreign language. You are just in the story.
To reach that state of immersion, you have to let go of perfection. This is my biggest tip for our listeners. Do not stop to look up every word. If you understand the general meaning of a paragraph, keep going. The more you stop, the more you break the magic of the story. You want to reach that flow state where the English words start turning into pictures in your mind.
I agree. I call it reading for gist. If you can get the gist or the general idea, you are winning. You can always mark a word with a pencil and look it up later, but stay in the narrative while you are reading.
What about note-taking, Liam? Some people like to have a notebook next to them. Do you think that helps or hinders the process?
I think it depends on the person, but I recommend doing it at the end of a chapter. Read the chapter, enjoy it, and then go back and pick out 3 or 4 interesting phrases or words that appeared a few times. If a word appears 5 times in a chapter, it is probably a high-frequency word that is worth learning.
That is a great strategy. I also love the idea of a reading journal, not a formal one, but just a place where you write 2 sentences after you finish your reading session. Something like, "Today the main character moved to London and he feels lonely." It forces you to summarize what you read in your own words.
That is active learning. It bridges the gap between input, which is reading, and output, which is writing. It is very powerful. Now, let's talk about some specific recommendations. For beginners or lower intermediate learners, I often suggest young adult novels or even graded readers. Graded readers are books written specifically for English learners at different levels.
Graded readers are fantastic because the vocabulary is controlled, but the stories are still engaging. However, if you want to try authentic literature, I think mystery novels are great. Writers like Agatha Christie use very clear, logical language. Plus, the desire to find out who the killer is keeps you very focused on the details.
Agatha Christie is a classic choice. Another one I like to recommend is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. His sentences are short and direct. He doesn't use a lot of overly complicated adjectives. It is very pure English.
That is a great suggestion. On the other end of the spectrum, if you want something modern, maybe look at someone like Roald Dahl. Even though he wrote for children, his vocabulary is so rich and creative. It is fun and slightly dark, which keeps adults interested too.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about the physical versus digital experience. Some people love the smell of paper, but e-readers like a Kindle can be amazing for English learners because of the built-in dictionary. You can just tap a word and see the definition instantly.
It is very convenient, but I find that I remember words better when I have to work a little bit for them. If I have to guess the meaning from the context first, it sticks in my brain longer. But you are right, for a very difficult text, an e-reader is a lifesaver.
We should also mention audiobooks. Listening to a book while you read the physical copy is a high-level technique. It helps you connect the spelling of a word with its pronunciation. It is a total immersion experience.
I love doing that. It really helps with the rhythm of the language. English has a specific musicality, and hearing a professional narrator read the narrative while you follow along is like having a personal tutor in your ears.
Let's talk about that word immerse again. To really immerse yourself, you need to create a habit. Even 10 minutes a day is better than 2 hours once a week. If you read before bed every night, your brain starts to associate English with relaxation rather than work.
That is such an important shift in mindset. If English is a chore, you will avoid it. If English is a gateway to a story you love, you will seek it out. I remember when I was learning my second language, I found a comic book series I loved. I didn't feel like I was studying. I felt like I was treating myself to a story.
Comics and graphic novels are actually a brilliant suggestion for learners. The pictures provide immediate context for the words. If a character says, "Look out," and you see a piano falling on their head, you don't need a dictionary to know what that phrase means.
Exactly, it makes the learning process intuitive. So, Liam, we have talked about choosing the book, using the 5-finger rule, focusing on the narrative, looking for plot twists, and finding ways to immerse yourself. What is one more tip for someone who feels stuck?
My final tip would be to read things you have already read in your native language. If you know the story of Harry Potter or The Alchemist in your own language, reading the English version is much easier because you already know the plot. You aren't struggling to understand what is happening. You are just focusing on how the English language expresses those events.
That is a brilliant shortcut. It takes away the stress of the unknown. You can focus entirely on the vocabulary and the sentence structures.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today. I hope our listeners feel inspired to pick up a book this evening.
I hope so too. It really is one of the most rewarding ways to grow your fluency. Let's do a quick recap of the key points we discussed today.
First, we talked about selection. Use the 5-finger rule to make sure the book is at the right level for you. Don't go too hard too fast.
Second, we looked at the importance of interest. Choose a narrative that you actually care about. Whether it is a mystery, a romance, or a biography, your interest is what will keep you reading.
Third, we discussed vocabulary. A plot twist is an unexpected turn in the story. The narrative is the story itself and how it is told. And to immerse yourself means to dive deep into the language and get lost in the book.
And finally, don't look up every word. Read for the gist, enjoy the flow, and maybe keep a small journal for the most important words you find.
That is a perfect summary, Emma. Thank you for all those insights today.
Thank you, Liam. It was a pleasure as always.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to the How to Better English podcast. Don't forget to leave that comment about how this episode will help you, and hit that like button.
We can't wait to read your thoughts. Happy reading, everyone, and we will see you in the next episode.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.